Hi, everybody. This is Matt Littleton. I'm an advanced compliance specialist here at Microsoft. We've got an area of focus on our government environments, GCC, gcc-high, and DoD. It is an honor to be with you today, coming to you, live on tape from my basement. 2020 here is certainly a year that's going to be remembered for a lot of things. And one of those things that I am very confident it's going to be remembered for is the year where we bring to bear as Microsoft many compliance capabilities inside our government environments. So I think it's going to be an exciting time for us all. And today, I want to do a couple of things with you. I'd like to just set some overall context on what we mean when we say compliance for Microsoft 365. Give you a view into some resources that you either as an end user or as an administrator can use to keep track of all of the changes that will be occurring in the environments as we move forward. And then take a look at two of the specific capabilities that are already released into the environments, that being the Unified Labeling Scanner and our advanced eDiscovery capability. An important note, everything that we're going to look at today through the demos is actually set up in a GCC environment so that you'll be seeing this capability live inside of GCC itself. So at Microsoft, when we think about compliance in M365, we're talking about three main pillars built on a foundation of compliance management. And today, we'll be focused on two of the capabilities, the Unified Labeling Scanner and Client, inside the Information Protection and Governance pillar, and the Advanced eDiscovery capability inside the Discover and Respond pillar. So let's go take a look on how we can keep track of everything. I'd like to focus on a couple of the resources that you can use as an end user and as an administrator to keep track of all of the changes that are coming into GCC, gcc-high, in the DoD environments, particularly as it pertains to the compliance capabilities. First site is actually our public Microsoft 365 roadmap site. I want to call everyone's attention to the fact that you can filter this site to be specific to your cloud instance. So if we're concerned about GCC, when I select that filter, you see all of the information is immediately updated. You can then further select down and filter by products and have information returned, or come up and even do a keyword query for those items that you're actually interested in and understand what's happening. So this is publicly available for everyone. If you are an administrator in the Office 365 environment for your organization, underneath Health and the Message Center within the Administration Center, you have a running list of all of the changes that are tenant specific that we provide to the organization. So this gives you the ability to plan for upcoming changes, but also would offer up that this is a great resource to use across the organization and bring other stakeholders into the picture and inform them of some of the new capabilities that are going to be available inside the tenant. The release of the Unified Labeling Scanner and Client enables organizations in GCC, gcc-high, and DoD to unlock the power of sensitivity labels, to create, manage, control sensitivity labels in one spot, deploy them across your Microsoft 365 estate, and unlock all of the different potentials that come with these capabilities. So the ability for end users to have data automatically classified, allow users to have recommendations on what label should be applied to the content, and then also the ability to manually label content. As we look at the end user experience using the Unified Labeling Client, it's important to note two things. One, our demo is again set up in a GCC environment. Then the other thing to really notice is that the user experience remains the same across the Office 365 applications. So in this case, I've got a Word document open. The primary indicator to your end user that the Unified Labeling Client's been deployed is the appearance of the sensitivity button in the toolbar. This button is where the end user will action on this particular document. By selecting the sensitivity label button, I see the 4 labels that are available to this end user. And as we hover over each one of those labels, you see a pop-up tooltip that you can configure to help inform and educate your end users on the correct use of these labels in the environment. The other option that end users have is the ability to show the toolbar all the time so that they can always see the labels that are available to them. So for this particular document, as an agency memorandum, we want to manually label this as an agency internal document. So when I select that label, several things happen. You see in the upper left-hand corner an indication that this is now a labeled document. And inside the document itself, because we've configured the label to do so, there's been a header, a watermark, and then a footer applied to this particular document. So from a manual perspective, you can see the experience. If we create a new document and we paste in some sensitive information, so now we've got PII data in this document. I have a PII content label that's available to this end user, but we've also configured this label to automatically apply when sensitive information has been placed into a document. This action with the unified labeling client occurs at save. So as I save this document, you'll see two things immediately happen. As an end user, I get a visual notification that a label was automatically applied to my document and why that was applied. And then that same consistent indicator that this is now a labeled document is created for me. So if I then come over to PowerPoint, which has got a blank PowerPoint presentation, same sensitivity button, same four labels, same ability to show the different buttons to me with the toolbar. And then if I select the agency internal label, you see I again get a header, a footer, and a watermark on the document. If I create another blank presentation inside PowerPoint, and let's say we come here and we add that same sensitive content into a PowerPoint presentation. The same scenario applies. This is sensitive information. We have the label configured to automatically apply the PII content label, again, at time of save for this particular PowerPoint presentation. So same experience with the pop-up showing that this was labeled by the system and why, and then the visual indicator that this is a now labeled document. We come to Excel, slightly different on the visual presentation inside the document. Same sensitivity button, same four labels, same ability to show the bar. But if I select agency internal here, we see the agency internal tag applied to the document. But given that this is a spreadsheet, we don't see the header, footer, or watermark yet. However, if I come over to print that document, you will see the header, the watermark, and the footer are applied at that point in time. Finally, moving to Outlook, if we have an email that we want to send inside Outlook, same experience with the sensitivity button, same four labels, same ability to put the toolbar on for the end user. So if we select agency internal here, you'll see that there is a visual indication that the agency internal label has been applied to this document. And then when you actually send the document, looking at the sent folder for this particular, or for a different email that's been sent with agency internal, the header and the footer are applied when the document is sent forward. So that's a quick overview of the experience for an end user utilizing the unified labeling client inside all of the different Office applications. So let's now go look at what the experience would be like for an administrator to actually create and publish labels. So now that we've seen the end user experience on unified labeling and its consistency, let's now look at how you as an administrator would set up and configure sensitivity label across the environment. So the starting point for this is going to be the Microsoft 365 Compliance Center. And the solution that we'll be using is the Information Protection Console. Here is where we actually create all of the labels inside the environment and then also publish those labels out. So on this page, you'll see the same labels that we had available to our end users. Note that we've got 8 labels here, but the end user that we saw before only saw 4. And that's due to the fact that you create all of your labels in one place, and then you create policies that will publish specific labels to specific users, groups, or the entire organization. So let's take a look at how we actually go through and set up a label. So we'll use the labels that we already have to step through. This is the point where you, after naming the label, where you have the ability to enter in the description. This is the pop-up tooltip that we saw with all of the labels, as well as a description that you can use internally for your administrators to keep track of the different labels and their use. I then have an option with each label whether or not we want to set encryption on the document when that label is applied. So in this case, we have not applied encryption, and we come to the content marking section. And here's where we've added the watermark, the header, and the footer that you saw on the document. And you have the ability to customize this, not only size, color, but the layout of all of the visual markings inside the particular document. As you recall, the agency internal label, we did not automatically apply. So this is the section where you determine whether you want this label to be automatically applied or as a manual option for your end users. So let's then look at that PII content label that was created. Similar format in terms of adding the description. The primary difference in this label is the auto labeling portion. So here is where you as an administrator would configure that auto labeling. And in this case, we've set this label up to say if indeed there's content in the document that matches either a credit card number or a social security number, we want to automatically apply the label to the document. And then the tooltip that comes up that informs the user of the reasoning behind that action. You also have the ability inside the unified labeling client using sensitivity labels to, instead of automatically applying that label, recommend that the label be applied. At that point in time, when the document is acted upon, there's a recommendation that comes up to the end user. It says, hey, this content has been detected in the document. The organization believes you should apply this label, and then allow the user to manually select that label. So many different options in terms of how you configure those labels, but that's just the first step. So at this point, think of this as the library of all of the labels in the one place where you create all of the labels that you will use across your entire Microsoft 365 estate. The big benefit of the shift to sensitivity labels is we have brought together in one location the place where you create all of your labels and then actually leverage and publish those labels out. And that's the second step of the process, is the actual publication of labels. Who sees what in the organization? Not all users need to see all labels. So you may have a sensitive project that only involves a small group in the organization that need that label to be visible to them. So you can scope the policy down to those end users. And you do that by publishing a label policy. So the label policy that we have here that published those 4 labels that we saw is our default agency-wide label policy. So let's step through how we create that. In the first step, you would select the actual labels that you wish to publish. And this is where you would be presented with all of the labels. You select the ones that are going to be in scope for this policy. The next step is publishing to whom the labels should be visible. In this case, we've published this to everyone in the organization. Then the settings for those particular labels. You have the ability to set an organization-wide policy that will automatically apply a default label to all documents and information when created. In this case, we've chosen not to do that. This is also where you can set controls around the label policies where users have to actually justify removing or changing a label. You can require users to have a label on their document. And then you can also create a custom internal page for help information on your particular labeling schema and your agency process. We then give the policy a name, and then we publish this out. And this is the action that you as an administrator would take to actually make the selected labels visible to the end users. So in this case, we took 4 labels, we made them visible to everyone in the organization, and as we stepped through that end user experience, you saw those same 4 labels available to the end user. So let's now go take a look at advanced eDiscovery. Seek to land 3 main advantages with this new solution. First, reducing risk to organizations. Advanced eDiscovery is an integral part of Office 365, allows you to process on data inside the security boundary of Office 365. No longer do you have to pull data out to do that initial processing and reduction of data. We want to reduce also that cost and increase the efficiency for the organization by taking what used to be a large set of data that you would have to move out of a solution for review and processing and call that data in place so that you're only exporting out the smallest amount of data that is responsive to the matter at hand. So several new capabilities inside advanced eDiscovery that we'll be discussing in the demo, but want to highlight those for you here on the slide. And I'm excited for you to have the chance to put your hands on this and really understand the advantages that it brings to the organization. So let's go take a look at advanced eDiscovery. As we continue to accelerate the deployment of compliance capabilities into GCC, gcc-high, and DoD, your experience as a compliance administrator professional will also continue to evolve. So as today, most of this action starts in the Security and Compliance Center, where we've undertaken the effort to aggregate all of the security capabilities into the Microsoft 365 Security Center, and then for compliance, all of those compliance capabilities into the M365 Compliance Center. So compliance.microsoft.com in the GCC namespace is the new starting point for that. Slightly different navigation experience, but also the ability to customize that navigation experience and pin the solutions that you use on a routine basis to your nav bar so that you can get to them quickly. Today, as we look at advanced eDiscovery, to highlight some of the new capabilities in advanced eDiscovery, easiest way to do that is by using an existing case. So when you open a case inside advanced eDiscovery, high-level dashboard overview of the case itself, the number of custodians, what's the communication state back and forth on holds, any other issues with the case that's presented to you. And then working sort of left to right here with this, we can see some of the new capabilities. So this particular case, we have 7 custodians that are involved. A new feature within advanced eDiscovery is the ability to bulk upload and import custodians. So if you have a large number of custodians that you know are going to be associated with a case, you can prepare all of that information offline into a CSV file, upload it into Office 365 via the dialog here, and have the system process over all of those custodians in a sort of one fell swoop. Another key feature that's part of Office 365 is the ability to manage custodial hold notifications. So from that communication perspective, a couple of key points. One, you have to build the communication itself. So you would give the communication a name specific for this particular case that you're working on, designate the issuing officer, and so from whom this would appear to actually come from the hold notification. Key step then would be define the portal content itself. What's the hold notice itself actually going to tell the custodian to do? What's the scope of this? What actions they need to take? The system has the ability to insert multiple different links inside the hold notice to customize it to a degree. One of the important things here is the acknowledgement link. So the custodian that receives this actually has a link embedded in the email that they can click that comes back and registers that they have received and are complying with the hold notice. For those custodians that have a large number of matters that they're routinely involved with, there's actually a portal where they can go and they can see all of the different cases that they're actually associated with. Once you've defined the content itself, then you need to get in the mode of how you're going to communicate that to the custodians. So 3 different things that are mandatory for that. The issuance notice itself that will send out that hold notification, creation of a reissuance should there be the need to reissue or update the hold notice. And then finally, a release of the custodian from that. So notifying the custodian that they've been released from the hold. Two optional capabilities that are also associated with this. One, set up a reminder if the custodian doesn't actually respond in an appropriate amount of time, and then an escalation path to bring the custodian's management into the picture. After you create the holds, then you actually pick the custodians to whom you wish to send the information. Recognizing also that while this is organic to the platform, you can leverage this inside Advanced eDiscovery. Sending a hold notice is not a requirement. So there we recognize there are times where that's neither required nor desired. So in internal investigation, those things where you don't want the actual end custodian to be aware of what's going on, you just simply don't send a hold notice out. On the hold front, the benefit of Advanced eDiscovery is that you can execute in-place holds for all of the data that is in scope for this. So in this particular case, we've got 1,500 items on hold, 8 mailboxes, 8 different sites that are actually on hold inside Office 365 now until we go in and technically release them from being on hold. A quick note on processing. One of the key values of Advanced eDiscovery is that all the data that is brought into Advanced eDiscovery is actually re-indexed at a very deep level. So the goal of Advanced eDiscovery is to process all of that data, remove any indexing errors or unindexed or partially indexed items, so that you as a reviewer have the ability to quickly and efficiently filter down to just the information that's responsive to the matter at hand. So once you've got all of that indexed data, the next step for you in that gathering process is to execute searches in the environment and against the data that you have on hold or the rest of the tenant as well as necessary. As you execute these searches, the system will give you a series of statistics so you can evaluate the search to make sure that it's performing and hitting the areas that you believe it should be addressing, and then also to sample the data to make sure that the data that's being returned by your search is what you expect and that the volume and the accuracy is appropriate. When you're content with that, the next step after you search the data is actually to put it into a review set. Here's where we then, as reviewers, would go in and start to really work through culling that data down to that which is responsive to whatever the request actually may be that a FOIA request, to be that an IG request, whatever the matter at hand actually is. So when I open up this review set into which we've loaded all of this data, you'll see there's over 1,000 items that are included in this particular review set. As a reviewer, you've got the ability to very quickly do a quick overview and assessment and get your arms around what's the data that you're actually looking at. Who is this data sent to? Who are the top custodians involved? What's the actual data that you'll be working with? So you see in this particular review set, it's a very email heavy for us. So it helps to align and understand the amount of time and the impact and how this review will proceed. Other things that Office 365 Advanced eDiscovery does for you is will automatically generate 2 different queries out of all of this information. One of them being potentially immaterial items. These are things like, icon images, things that are likely just sort of system images, not really important. Second thing that is developed for you is a review query, and this query has gone out and gathered all of the inclusives, all of the unique elements and brought them together. And we've gone from over 1,000 items that we were going to review if we went through each one of them manually, now down to 200. So the system has processed and pulled all of that together for us. It's important in today's world to understand how we're going to quickly go through that. So IM, chat, lots of different capabilities that employees are using, and we need to be able to discover and evaluate. So I've clicked on a Teams thread. here. And you'll notice that the chat has actually been reconstructed and placed into context so that you as a reviewer can quickly see and discern the content and context of this particular chat session. The other thing that is presented to you as a reviewer when you select a document is the tagging panel. So this is where we would actually go through as a reviewer and tag as responsive, non-responsive, anything that we need to be doing with this particular data element. This tagging panel is fully customizable for each case and for your agency, whatever sections that you need and information that you need for your review, you're able to create and place here in your own tagging panel. Further, from this 214 items, I can continue to refine as a reviewer the things that I want to actually see and evaluate first. So a long list of conditions that we have available to us to help us narrow down our search. So if I select file class, come over, I can actually filter this particular review set down now just to documents. And as we go through and look at these documents and selecting a document similar to what we saw with the Teams chat, you see an actual representation of the document in a native viewer so that you understand what this document is all about. My tagging panel is there, but then we also have the ability to look at both near dupes and exact dupes for this particular data. So the file that I'm actually selected here is our main file. And on the near dupes that are presented to me, I can open up that near dupe copy also in a source view, but I can also then look at it in a text difference view so that the system will tell me very quickly what are the deltas between my main document and these near dupes. As we're going through looking at those differences, you also have the ability to quickly tag and execute against those documents so that you're only really having to touch that document and review it once. You understand what it is, you understand the impact, and you can execute the review. The other thing that you will need to do in many cases is perform some redaction on a document. So for this particular document, if it's going to be responsive, we know we've got social security numbers and credit card numbers in it. So inside the system, in the annotation view, we've got the ability to actually draw and create redactions on our documents. So I've already redacted on this particular document those areas. You can also make those redactions opaque so that subsequent reviewers can actually see what has been redacted as part of your process before you continue on with the data. So we've culled down from over 1,000 items down into 200 items. We've got 43 documents here. But as we go back and look at some of our other searches, if indeed, Project Moonbeam was my particular item of interest, we narrow this down to say 9 documents. The next step for us in the eDiscovery process is to take and export this information. So if I've got a small number of documents and I want to deal with these internally, I can actually download them locally, or much more common would be to export this information out. So as an export set, you've got the ability to do just the documents or the entire review set, understand what metadata is going to go forward with those documents. If your next review tool needs to consume the files as individual chat messages and can't process the system as a threaded chat, you're able to split the chats back out, not a problem. Also, where you have the option to replace the redacted natives, with converted PDFs. Most significant, though, in this pane, in the area that I really want to draw attention to, is where you are going to place this export. So the default within Advanced eDiscovery is to send this export to a Microsoft-provided Azure Blob storage location. If your agency is already using Azure, within Advanced eDiscovery, you have the ability to send the export from Advanced eDiscovery to Azure storage that your organization controls. This keeps this information, while it is exported from the security boundary of Office 365, inside the agency's security boundary because it's being placed in your Azure storage. So all of your auditing, retention, security, access policies that you have on your Azure storage are by default extended into the data that you place in there. So for organizations that are focused on that and keeping the information inside their control to the maximum extent possible, this option is a tremendous value add. So I hope that you found some of these demos in the discussion valuable today. We've got a slide with some of the URL resources for where you can actually get to the Compliance Center as an administrator and start to work with and configure these new capabilities that are available in your environment. I'm excited for the rest of 2020. I'm excited for compliance in Microsoft 365. And I know that I and all of my peers that support you are very eager to continue the discussion as we move forward. So thanks again for the time.